Jacob 2, the Mormon Loophole. Does the Lord really give us a license to commit polygamy? Stephen Covey, one of my favorite authors of all time, wrote about a famous study done at Harvard including two groups of people. One group was given this picture of a young woman and told to look at it. The other group was given this picture of an older woman and told to look at it. Then they were both given this final picture and asked to describe what they saw. We can guess what happened. Each group saw in the new picture what they had been led to see from the pictures they were given before. I think this phenomenon is present with the members of the church today in regards to the famous polygamy loophole found in Jacob 2:30. I think we have been shown a version of the picture that has led most of us as members to only see one possible interpretation, and perhaps miss the true interpretation of Jacob's words. I'd like to look at both possibilities or pictures of Jacob 2:30 so that we can each decide for ourselves what it really means. The supposed loophole is found in a talk Jacob gave to the people about polygamy. Actually, it's a talk within a talk. The entire talk from Jacob 1-3 is about inequality, the inequality of wealth, inequality of power, inequality of race, and inequality of gender. But the gender part is, of course, the most well-known piece. The confusion revolves around one sentence from the talk. In Jacob 2:30, Jacob quotes the words of the Lord. "For if I will, saith the Lord of hosts, raise up seed unto me, I will command my people. Otherwise they shall hearken unto these things." For over 150 years, the church has taught us that this sentence is the Lord's justification for the practice of polygamy. That Christ is telling us it's okay to have plural wives and concubines, as long as the current church leaders say it is. Even today, when we look at the Come Follow Me manual covering Jacob's talk, this is what the church interpretation tells us. Quote, "Immorality was affecting the Nephites as a people and as individuals. How are these ways similar to the consequences of immorality you see in today's world?" And note that Jacob also addressed the practice of having more than one wife. What do you find in Jacob 2 that helps you understand why the Lord has, in limited situations, commanded his people to practice plural marriage? What surprises me most about this interpretation is that no mention at all is made of the Lord's very clear command against polygamy in the chapter. Instead, the church interprets the whole speech as a command to practice polygamy. The problem is, without a very and generous interpretation of verse 30, no such commandment to practice polygamy exists at all. This push by the church to see the commandment of the Lord as one to practice polygamy seems disingenuous and deceptive to me. I don't know if the church is deliberately trying to make us only see one picture, the one they want us to see, or if they're just uninformed, and I may never know. To get a clear understanding of whether the Lord is commanding us to practice polygamy in Jacob 2, as the church says, or to not practice polygamy, as the Lord himself says, let's take a look at the talk. Just as a warning, having spent much of my adult life as an English teacher, I find a sick enjoyment in dissecting essays and talks to understand the steps. I'm sorry if this exercise gives you flashbacks to your English class. I just can't help it. So here we go, Jacob's talk, which is actually just him quoting the Lord's own essay on the subject. First, the topic the Lord wants to address in verse 23. "For behold, thus saith the Lord, this people begin to wax in iniquity. They understand not the scriptures, for they seek to excuse themselves in committing whoredoms, because of the things which were written concerning David and Solomon his son, which thing was abominable before me, saith the Lord." So, Houston, we have a problem. The men are wanting to practice polygamy. Second, the foil in verse 25. "Wherefore, thus saith the Lord, I have led this people forth out of the land of Jerusalem by the power of mine arm, that I might raise up unto me a righteous branch from the fruit of the loins," or the seed, "of Joseph." So in other words, what are you doing, men? I led you out of Jerusalem, which is being destroyed right now because of this exact wickedness, so I would at least have one group of seed who weren't following David and Solomon's bad examples. Third, the Lord's clear commandments. 27. "Hearken to the word of the Lord, for there shall not any man among you have save it be one wife, and concubines ye shall have none." I just don't see how the Lord could be any clearer, and yet the writers of Come Follow Me entirely missed this whole sentence. Further on in verse 34, "These commandments were given to your father Lehi." In verse 29, "Wherefore, keep my commandments, or cursed be the land for their," the women's, "sakes." The Lord's trying to set up a protection for the women here. So, He makes it clear exactly what his commandment is on polygamy. Don't do it. Now comes the thesis statement of the Lord's entire essay in verse 30. For if I will, saith the Lord of hosts, raise up seed unto me, referring to Lehi's family, the righteous branch of Joseph's loins, in verse 25, I will command my people, verse 27, 29, 34, his commandments to only have one wife and no concubines. Otherwise, they shall hearken unto these things, referring to the things concerning David and Solomon, in verse 23. So the Lord wants a righteous people who follow his commands instead of following the things written about David and Solomon. That is such a powerful thesis statement. And so it's tragic that the leaders of our church have turned it around 180 degrees and taught it to mean exactly the opposite, that the Lord commands polygamy. He has just got to be scratching his head at this epic fail. Continuing on, the Lord fleshes out his essay by giving us 3 supporting arguments for condemning polygamy. Supporting argument number 1, verse 31. For behold, I, the Lord, have seen the sorrow and heard the mourning of the daughters of my people. So he's saying, I'm personally aware of these women's plight, and I care about them. Supporting argument number 2, verse 35. Ye have broken the hearts of your tender wives, and the sobbings of their hearts ascend up to God against you. Men, don't you care about women? Don't you care that you're breaking their hearts? Have you no Christ-like compassion? Supporting argument number 3, I will not suffer that the cries of the fair daughters of this people, which I have led out of the land of Jerusalem, shall come up unto me against the men of my people. Men, you're doing exactly the thing which I led you out of Jerusalem not to do. You're making my fair daughters cry all over again. You can just see the Lord shake his head in disbelief here. Finally, the Lord finishes with a powerful reiteration of his commandment, as well as a warning, in verse 33. For they, the men, shall not lead away the captive, the daughters of my people, because of their tenderness, save I shall visit them with a sore curse, even unto destruction. For they shall not commit whoredoms like to them of old, referring to David and Solomon, saith the Lord of hosts. In other words, stop now. If you don't, you're gonna be destroyed. I will not let you practice polygamy, period. Okay, so a clear, straightforward essay from Christ. Very impressive. So how did we as a church get it so completely backward? As far as I can tell, the church leadership is trying to do one of 2 things. The first possibility is they're trying to make us forget the whole essay. They do this by just pulling out the thesis statement, soundbite, taking it out of context, turning it around 180 degrees in order to attempt to justify the polygamy so many of our leaders, past and present, have practiced. It seems to me that this is what Come Follow Me is trying to do. The second possibility I see is the church's interpretation of the Lord's essay on polygamy takes out the thesis statement on verse 30, changes the first word for to but to make it contrary, and puts that verse at the very end of the essay as kind of a twist to everything the Lord had just said in his whole essay. Kind of like the Lord is saying, I know I just delivered a passionate speech about the evils of polygamy and how upset I am about the sobbing daughters, but actually I kind of like polygamy, and I command you to do it. Either way, I'm really starting to wonder about the motives of our church leadership. In conclusion, I believe it's the responsibility of each of us as members of the church to look closely at the different interpretations of Jacob 2:30, the 2 different pictures of the same picture, to follow Covey's analogy, and decide for ourselves which is the one the Lord is saying. Which version is most in line with his true character and what you know of him? And which one do you believe?